We have our presentation, and I'd like you to help. You have the members. Do I have members? Yes, I do. I'm here to sign. Actually, I have a few members here. Okay. Where's the Zeina? We have our presentation, and I'd like you to help. You have the members. Do I have members? Yes, I do.
All right, thank you, Diana. Kind of extend on your points a bit, especially with the Stockholm comment about immigrants maybe being some of the drain on Stockholm economy. According to the census, at least in North Bay, the average income of an immigrant is pretty much at par with a landed or a regular Canadian. So obviously they don't have the same success in this here in Canada. And as well, on her Saskatchewan point, that was one part of the country that notoriously lost a lot of people per year, going, I think recently going to Alberta or to other parts of Canada. And recently Saskatchewan had an aggressive retention campaign. They've now turned around their migration outflow and turn it into an inflow. So they're gaining on the immigration side right now. Anyway, just 2 points to start off. Thank you for introducing me. My name is Greg Sutherland. I work at the board for the Center for Municipal Studies. And when Diana was talking about our chief economist mentioned how important immigration will be in the future, he's not just saying this, just to say something. In the census, in the 2006 census, a good chunk of our population growth in Canada was from immigration. And in the next 20 years, it could possibly be all of our population growth. So it's going to be very important to be able to attract newcomers. Now, when we get down to a city, on a city level, it's going to become even more because we have so much competition out there. And that's why we came up with this city magnets report. Ultimately, we wanted to find which cities in Canada were attractive to all migrants. We're talking about international migrants, so those coming from another country, to, let's say, a city like North Bay. We're also talking about interprovincial migrants, those who come from within Canada but a different province, to North Bay, and we're also taking into account the inner city migrants, so those people within Ontario who move and would come to an area like North Bay. So we took all that migration data, because really that's who as a city, that's who you're trying to attract. You're not, sure it's great to get the newcomers, but if you look at your Toronto, Montreal, your Vancouver, those are the big landing points for international migrants. They have been, it's been like that for years. However, they have such an outflow of people after year one that's another area which that we can attract people. It's not just do people come into the country, it's those who land in Toronto, maybe are looking for something else, aren't getting their skill set noticed as much as they think they should, and so they move around, they look for opportunities elsewhere. I think Toronto loses about 15 to 20,000 people per year to other provinces. So just getting some of that maybe to come to this region could be a target. And they also lose, I think, another 6,000 people per year just going to other cities in Ontario. And that data, that's metro data, so it's not like they're moving to the suburbs. They're moving outside of Toronto and going elsewhere in the province. So anyway, that's why we came up with this City Magnets report. It's really to find out how attractive Canadian cities are. And when we get down to city level data, unfortunately the census is really our only source or extensive source of data. So all of the research you see after this comes from the 2006 census.
But we started with a kind of a Richard Florida theory where it's no longer people moving to where the jobs are. People are going to cities that they feel best reflect their personality, their ideals, or their interests, and the businesses are kind of following them there. Therefore, when you take into account economic potential, you want to be able to attract a skilled labor force that basically allows business to set up in your city in the future. Now, this is a paradigm that's slowly changing over the years, been slowly changing over the years, and will continue to change a little bit more. But that's really the premise we started when we undertook this project, is trying to create a reasons why a city would be attractive. So we have our migration data. Basically, we have a ranking. We're not just taking total migration. We kind of did it on a per capita basis, and we looked at who was attracting the most people on a net basis, and we tried to come up with indicators really to match those migration rankings. Now, in the main City Magnets report, we had a list of 41 indicators, and understanding that different people are attracted to various cities for different reasons, we broke it out into 7 domains. Some are attracted to economic prospects, others to health. Other migrants might be attracted to the education aspect of the city. And we have environment, housing, innovation, and society too. And kind of the upshot of the City Manager's report is based on the level of education of the migrant. What attracted them to a city differed. Some were attracted to the economic prospects more. Others were attracted to, let's say, the society aspect. So those were our main areas that we focus on in City Magnets. Now, for this workshop, because City Magnets is a kind of a 6-month full-time intensive project, we had to scale it down a bit to about 20 indicators this time around. But we're trying our best to fit North Bay into the report, because we started with the 50 largest Canadian cities. We did a workshop in Brockville late last year, and we incorporated Brockville into this study. We're doing the same thing here with North Bay and with Timmins as well, to get a kind of a regional feel. Sudbury and Thunder Bay are also included in the report, so you get more of a Northern Ontario comparison. But so we take the top 50, and now we have 20 indicators across those themes that we were talking about. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on the. Well, maybe I'll start moving that thing. Okay, there we go. I'm not going to spend too much time on the methodology. Basically, we had a ranking system, A, B, C, or D. So across these 20 indicators, if you ranked well, you got an A. If you didn't, you got a D. You got a D. We didn't feel, confident enough to say anyone's failing, so no one gets an F. But really, the whole purpose is to try to line up what makes cities attractive, and really areas you can focus on going forward to make your area attractive. Now, I think from there we can get into the actual results. Okay, so I'm going to go through probably about 15 slides about where North Bay would rank and some other cities in Northern Ontario against the larger spots in the country. However, it's you can't. Okay. Well, I guess we could spend more time on these than I thought. The thing with North Bay is it's kind of a small fish in this study, because our original intent was to analyze the top 50 cities in the country. North Bay is smaller than all those 50. Now, we kept Brockville in here, so I think Brockville, Timmins in here too. So they're the 3 smallest. So it's kind of an uphill battle, but nonetheless, it's still an interesting little experiment. I think probably a better, or at least future research, would be to see how North Bay compares with cities of its own size throughout Canada. But if we take a look here, we have our first one was employment growth, and those arrows are kind of off, as you can see. North Bay is down here. Oh boy. North Bay is that middle green bar, right above the this could be difficult, right above the 1% line. Their employment growth was about 1.5% from 2006 to 2001. So they're gaining about 0.4% per year employment. So the big areas outside of Toronto really grew, and of course they rank better. That very small bar at the very right is Toronto, though, and the city of Toronto. So they're not really, their employment's not really growing at all. It's the suburbs that are.
So just let me just clarify. I'm sorry about the condition of the slide, and I'm really hoping when we hit the next. Yeah, maybe it's going to be for the whole presentation, in which case you might want to fix it. But let's just take a look in a second. But the big the large bars on the left are the regions around Toronto. They're doing very well in employment growth. And then Toronto City Centre was far to the right, very low employment growth. And then North Bay was experiencing modest employment growth, let's say.
This is North Bay right here. And this was our 1% line right there. So it remains that the suburban Toronto cities are growing the fastest, are creating the most jobs. However, I did mention that Toronto is right here at the very, on the very right. Anyway. So, the story remains that the suburban Toronto has been creating the most jobs. The city is not doing so well. North Bay, creating about, I think I had about on the chart here, about 1.5% growth per year. So, and that's pretty respectable. Because we did an A, B, C, and D ranking, given the colors on the graph right now, I don't think you can look at that legend at the top. But it is a C grade. Now our next slide is the unemployment rate. But anyway, the smallest unemployment rates in the country have been out west, as you can imagine. North Bay is doing okay. Again, I have them as a C grade. The largest unemployment rates we've seen in the country, at least at that time, were yes, please, thank you. Were in some manufacturing sectors. So here you have your Windsor, your St. Catharines, and I think St. John's is even in there. Calgary and Edmonton are there at the front. North Bay would be the, where are we? North Bay is kind of centered in about here. So looking at my notes at least. So I have to go just under 8% back in 2006. And that's actually, in the years following, that went down a bit. But 2009 it rose, like, well, it rose everywhere. So it's wasn't really a North Bay issue. I think next we're going to get into some education. No, after this one we'll get into education indicators. Income per capita. That's the two front ones are suburbs around Toronto. Their incomes in Toronto tend to be the highest in the country. I think that's Oakville, Burlington there. North Bay is
what I try to do was just pinpoint with my very snazzy arrows the northern Ontario cities, the Timmins, North Bay, Sudbury, and Thunder Bay, and I put Brockville in there because we included it for a previous workshop, and it's a small town. I also put that in there. So, but the story remains the same. Where kind of the suburbs around Toronto are at least creating the most jobs. North Bay coming in, a little over 1% per year growth, and Timmins also ranking pretty well. Now, the unemployment rate kind of is story remains the same too. In the West was the you got the lower unemployment rates. Job growth there was really strong up into 2006.
Lévis at the top there. That's a part of Quebec City. I think it finished #1, but it's the same with the manufacturing towns. Really didn't do well, and Montreal's not didn't perform very well on the unemployment rate either. Towns in Northern Ontario doing reasonably well. It's in the middle of the pack ranking. The next indicator, if I remember correctly, is the incomes. Spots of suburbs around Toronto have the highest income in the country. Even some places out west do. Places in Northern Ontario, North Bay, it's again middle of the pack. North Bay maybe a little bit on the lower end. I think next we kind of get into some education rankings. We have the college degrees. I think the next one is even a bachelor's degree, and after that is advanced degree. Northern Ontario really ranking well in here. People getting college diplomas, so it does show that it does have an educated population. When you get into the next slide, which is the bachelor's degrees, that's more where you find the larger cities doing well. And even with the next slide, the advanced degree, your PhDs and whatnot, that seems to be focused on cities. I think we had 1 or 2 environment indicators here. And the next one is air quality. It's a little different kind of indicator. So it's not something you can easily control if you're a city, even though history has probably shown that, because Southern Ontario has the worst air quality in the country. I had one city complain. It's like, well, we can't, and it was probably a small city around Toronto, so we can't control our air quality. And it's like, well, no, but I think people look at it when they decide where to go, because sometimes it follows weather patterns. But anyway, you can see who falls last. There, it's Southern Ontario. Northern Ontario having really good air quality. North Bay is included in that. Some places out west have never even had an air quality advisory, and that's air quality advisory. Of course, when you hear on the radio that environment, I think it's the Environment Ontario issues them. So every province has their own kind of standards, but they're relatively the same across the country. Anyway, moving on. Another environment indicator we use is water usage. Looks like North Bay people here use a ton of water. I don't know why. I mean, every city. Every city has different metering rates and ways to monitor water, and North Bay just might be different. We don't have, in cities, water quality tends to be really similar. When you get the smaller cities up north where you might get the boil water advisories, but anyway, I'm not going to get into that right now. It's places in Montreal and Quebec also have a different kind of metering system. I think they pay a flat rate and you can use as much as they want. So they don't really rank that well either. You see Montreal's really high. So anyway, moving on from there, we had a housing theme. Unfortunately, it took a lot of work to get a lot of data, because we had a bunch of work on a bunch of indicators on size of your mortgage and stuff like that. But I wasn't able to replicate it here. But this ranking takes into account pretty much the age of the housing stock, and places around Toronto or the cities are not new, but I mean, you saw the employment growth, the population growth in those suburbs have been really high, and they're building a lot of homes. In comparison, North Bay has an older housing stock, so Montreal, I guess, has one of the oldest. So they finished last, but anyway, it's kind of, the ranking on this indicator is kind of weighed down by the fact that there's a lot of new homes around the Toronto area. Moving on, another education indicator. So this was more of an innovation kind of indicator where we take a look at what kind of degrees people are getting, and a lot of computer science companies are in Toronto, and Ottawa, and government employees, people with these degrees, and Waterloo, as you can see it. And this isn't really the kind of industry that's around Northern Ontario, so they rank a little lower here. I think everywhere here on in, though, we'll be looking at society indicators, which will be fairly interesting. So I think next, thank you very much. The Richard Florida thesis is that the most mobile part of the population is your young population, or your young and educated population. They have the ability to move around the most because they feel they can get a job anywhere, and then they'll go to a city that basically is to their liking. So this is why we included this. We're trying to take a look at how, the certain age cohort of the population. If this is the most mobile, your young population might be attracted to a city with a similar sized young population. Big cities tend to have a younger population. We see, when we did this in Brockville, I think they finished last in there, but suburbs tend to have the older population. North Bay ranking, ranking a little lower there. But there's also diversity that we take into account when we talk about population. So next, we take a look at how diverse your population is, basically where everyone has been born, and the next slide also takes into. Oh, sorry, that's a little too fast. Thank you very much. Suburbs, where you see the maybe the foreign-born population really skyrocket. It kind of goes back to the fact that some of them move pretty recently after they land. To the next slide, though, kind of takes into account to how diverse your population is. So if all you're foreign-born or born in one country, then it's not really a diverse population. This kind of takes into account any type of culture that your population has. And North Bay ranking better there. It just means that of the newcomers you're bringing in, they're coming from many different places, not just from one spot. So it's definitely a better cultural ranking there. Next, we have this is a poverty measure, and poverty is obviously a larger problem in the larger cities. Northern Ontario doesn't have this issue at all. If we keep on going, I think this indicator is a little more representative of the larger cities. We try to look at transit use as a form of conservation as well. Cities dominate here, and especially the big cities. We just try to look at who's taking public transit to work as opposed to driving to work, and it's kind of a different setup in Northern Ontario than some of the cities in other cities in the country. So they don't rank as well, but still not that bad. I think our last we have a couple more slides, and they all refer to culture, and we try to look at access to libraries or access to museums, and it's basically access to culture. How long does it take the average person to get to a library or a museum? And North Bay ranks well there. We're not really doing anything else or ranking anything else other than how long it takes to get there. Timmins, I don't have an explanation for that one, but don't rank well. Don't rank well there. The next slide, I think, is the museum slide. It's kind of similar, where Northern Ontario ranks well. And I think the last slide is culture, who's employed in the culture. So it's another culture indicator. These are your writers, your artists, your performers, and North Bay ranking well there. It's a C grade, and obviously your cities are going to dominate there. So taking all that together, we come up with an overall ranking, and keeping in mind that we do have North Bay and Timmins, and even some of the other, even Sudbury and Thunder Bay are on the small side. But taking into account all of that, we kind of mash everything together and come up with an overall ranking. Basically, the letter grade you get there corresponds to a score, and we kind of average out the scores to come up with number 1 through number 53. And we have North Bay. Next slide, I think it just shows. We have North Bay placing 46, which is a C grade. So it's bottom middle of the pack, obviously. I think Timmins ended up probably closer to the bottom, but I think that ranking at least was ahead of Sudbury, but behind Thunder Bay. I think the next slide will show the actual rankings there. So in our scaled down version of our City Magnus report, we have North Bay, with the C rank, so placing well, given that it is the third smallest city in at least this ranking. It kind of punches above its weight, where it finishes higher than cities that are larger than it. How does this compare with our original ranking in city maintenance? Well, because no, that was fine. It's I'm trying to remember the slides in my head. First of all, we kind of take a look at where North Bay ranked in all the indicators. You see that on the left side are your A grades. It's doing well with I think nice air quality, which means it's a nicer environment. It's an educated population, but coming to the right where we see some of the D grades, it's more on the society side, and even when we get into foreign-born and population diversity. The next couple slides, we kind of do the same thing with other cities of the north, and you can see kind of a common theme where you do get the better education rankings doing pretty well, but when you get down to the D's, it seems like it's more of a society, the society indicators, which might spell that it's an older population and less diverse. And I think the next two slides are Sudbury and Thunder Bay. So it's kind of the same story. So after all that, we go one more. Yes, this is where we compare with our rankings, and in our city Magnus rankings, I think we discovered that Calgary and Waterloo and could you move one more slide, please? No, that's okay. I'm trying to remember. See how good my mind is. But yeah, Calgary, Waterloo, okay, and Ottawa, they finished the top of the ranks, and basically what we're trying to do is to see how our migration rankings compare with the rankings we created with the indicators. And we had in here, we don't have, Toronto doesn't really finish that great. You have big cities doing well, and some medium-sized cities too, and like Waterloo. A lot of people go to Waterloo, and it's people who go to school there and stay because it's turning into like a high-tech area. Ottawa is, the government hires like a lot of people of various backgrounds, so that's why they rank so well. When you get to Toronto, it seems like the suburbs are doing a lot better. It's mostly, I think, people are generally deciding to live out there. But when you get to, let's say, a society ranking on the whole, that's where your cities really do well. So if we keep on going, I think we get all cities in there. And I think then remember, this is just the original ranking, and I guess getting to the bottom of it, we have some of the smaller cities at the bottom. I forget who finished last, but I think it's probably the manufacturing cities who've kind of been struggling recently. Oshawa, Longville, I know is one, in Brantford. Anyway, so those are the rankings. I think we're going to take further on when I sit down and Diana gets up again. We're going to talk about where North Bay has at least made improvements to these rankings. Anyway, but it does talk. Our whole report does talk about that. Cities need to be attractive to newcomers, and not just international migrants, but to all of those who move around. But I also wanted to say, before we get into seeing what North Bay has done recently, I wanted to look at some recent data, because North Bay is what we call a census agglomeration, and when I say we, I guess I mean Statistics Canada. So they don't have much timely data for these areas, and it's really the census where we have the most data. But there is some data we can look at to see how well North Bay is doing. If we move one more ahead. Now this doesn't tell us that much, except that it shows that labor force employment growth did take a hit in the most recent recession, but it also shows, at least recently, the last 5 years, if we look at the green line over the red line, it shows that our employment growth has kind of been outpacing our labor force growth, minus 2009. And from that, I think if we go to the next slide, we see that the unemployment rate has definitely been declining structurally over the past decade at least. So there's been a definite work has been really I guess people have been working hard, and things have been going well in North Bay. That more we see quite a bit of labor force growth, but there's always been the jobs there to accompany that, and that's why we see the unemployment rate decline. The thing with the unemployment rate, there's always a it's a two-headed monster. You can have job growth, or it could just be more people deciding to look for a job, or which is the increase in the participation rate, which is the next slide. So when you have a rising participation rate, so it's basically more people deciding that they want a job, and that's kind of goes into the calculation of an unemployment rate. Generally, without any new job growth, a rising participation rate means higher unemployment. But in North Bay, the good news is that more people are being involved in the labor market, but there are the jobs there that for them to get, and which is leading to a declining unemployment rate. So anyway, thought I'd end off on some positive news. Like every other city in the country, and even like every other country, North Bay suffered in the most recent recession. But it looks, at least from the most recent data, that great work is being done, and things are looking positive as a healthier labor market is at least coming showing through. On that note, I think I want to. So sorry for the delay, or the mix up at the beginning, but I think I want to turn it to Diana and Zeina, who will talk about recent developments in North Bay and how this ranking will have changed since 2006. Thank you.
Okay, so now that Greg's giving you a little bit of a brief of how North Bay has been doing in recent years, we looked into some very recent developments in North Bay that would have an indication of different types of improvements since 2006. One of them is the North Bay Regional Health Centre. That definitely indicates progress on different fronts. The health center includes a general hospital and a mental health center, and it works closely with other hospitals in the region, with the West Nipissing General Hospital and the hospital in the Mattawa area. So this is another, also they have 95% of the family physicians in North Bay are actively participating in this new health facility that offers a wide range of programs and services to the community. So that definitely increases the attractiveness of North Bay as a small community. Moving on to other developments. There have also been different types of developments with regards to immigration specific. Just to note, sorry, going back to the previous, the hospital, that was very recently opened, obviously, as a lot of you know, February 2011, I think. So this is a very recent development. So going back to the immigration stuff. So there has been a focus on attracting immigration. In 2010, they launched the North Bay launched the immigration portal, which was funded by the government, and gives prospective immigrants a lot of information on how to access everything they need to know about North Bay online. So it's an online network that is easily accessible to immigrants. It's available in multiple languages. I don't know the exact number of it, but so that definitely improves in making North Bay an attractive location for immigrants. They also opened in February 2008 the North Bay District Multicultural Center, which also offers various services to immigrants. This includes settlement assistant, job search assistant, immigration application, Canadian citizenship preparation, community referrals, and they also match volunteers with the newcomers in order to help them adjust and integrate into Northern Ontario. So this is so North Bay has recognized and taken steps necessary to become a welcoming city towards immigrants and make it easier for immigrants to arrive in North Bay and integrate well, finding jobs and fitting in within the community, etc. And then finally, there's also, so in September 2010, they launched the Professions North program, which launched career accreditation program for internationally trained immigrants, and that is to help many. Something that many immigrants have challenge with is finding jobs, and especially those that are internationally trained. So this helps in facilitating that process. And then finally, and also in February 2010, there was the Northern Ontario web portal for new businesses was also launched. And that's a collaborative project between North Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, Sudbury, Timmins, and Thunder Bay, which also works on improving the labor market and opening it up to immigrants and internationally trained workers from different backgrounds, etc. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the more concrete developments that have occurred in the last 4 or 5 years. Diana will give you, I guess, a little bit more of what we can expect in terms of projections on how that'll improve with the rankings that Greg previously gave us. So,
okay, so we'll do one more slide if you wouldn't mind. Next slide. So this is where the sort of smoke and mirrors comes in. I'm not an economist and I'm not a forecaster, and my colleagues get very frustrated with me when I start to tell you all what I think is going to happen to rankings and things like that. It's obviously really difficult in a period of 5 years to change this kind of an exercise. This is using StatsCan data. It's rigorous. The data is completely comparable across jurisdictions, and it is obviously very difficult to make improvements quickly. And it's just one strategy that the communities here in the north part of Ontario might want to adopt. Certainly rankings are important because people do look at rankings when they're published, and communities compete intensely on them. Our colleagues that do this work get calls from mayors all across Canada when the rankings come out saying, you know, what are you doing to our community? How can you say that North Bay is 46th out of 53? That doesn't help us any. But indeed, these rankings do occur, and they will continue to occur. And so you may want to adopt a strategy of identifying indicators where you feel there's a potential to drive some change over the years ahead. And so my job now is to help you think through what could be. And this slide is looking at, I'm sorry, the two colors are so close on the screen. At the top, you see 2016, and underneath that, 2011. And if we were looking at 2011, what are some areas of the projections that Greg and his colleagues have done that might reasonably we could expect to have changed? Well, certainly the population of 25 to 34 might be one that would look different in 2011 versus 2005. And as Greg pointed out a moment ago, the unemployment rate and the employment growth indicators are also areas where things may be sufficiently different that the grade would have moved up a step. Looking forward, though, out to 2016, there's a couple interesting things to stimulate your thinking as you go into, in particular, the roll up the sleeves work on Wednesday. Water use is off the scale for North Bay. And it is something that I understand the city is starting to look at more carefully with the change in the way the water is metered and so on. So this seems to me like one of the areas where you might want to get to know the impact of water usage on your reputation, and with young people caring deeply about issues of the environment and sustainability of the cities they live in and so on, you could actually potentially achieve great gains in a short period of time and sing about that nationally. I think one of the strategies that the northern communities in Ontario are going to have to adopt is a PR campaign. I drove up here yesterday from, I was on Lake Simcoe, and it was one of the most beautiful drives I've had in a long time, through Muskoka and arriving up here in North Bay. And, you know, very, very few of us do that drive. You should sing about the beauty of that drive and encourage more people to come up and visit the community. So what I'm suggesting to you is that you think a little bit about where you could show demonstrated change from 2006 through 2016 and publicize it nationally and make a splash about that in the media and so on. I'd be interested in knowing more about the housing situation in North Bay. Certainly in Saskatchewan, that is a major, major, major problem. Housing is unattainable for newcomers. There's little of it, and what little there is extremely expensive. So I would hope that in our panel that we'll have in a few minutes here, where we hear about your regional strategies and your community strategies, I'd love you to talk a little bit about what your plan is around housing and how you can ensure that northern communities in Ontario have some of the most appealing, affordable, well-designed, relevant to the kinds of newcomers that you're attracting. So many newcomers are not used to living in a single-family dwelling. Are you building single-family dwellings, or are you building condominiums and apartments and the kinds of housing that newcomers of various countries are accustomed to? Something to think about. I think I'm just going to pause here. I know the next panel will be going into greater depth around some of the strategies around these indicators and other, not necessarily specifically around the conference board's indicators, but your plans that will touch on much of the same kinds of things we're looking at. And I'll just ask you to open it up the dialogue a little bit with us and see what you think about what we've presented, and maybe we could just take a few minutes for Q&A and discuss what's in your head and what you're thinking about as a result of what you've heard this morning from us.